Hi, and welcome to HAVAN's Measure Twice, Cut Once. My name is Wendy McNeil. I am HAVAN CEO, and it's my pleasure to take over today's podcast. We're having a special conversation here today to talk about windows and mechanical systems. You know, so much has happened over the years, and it's going to be a great conversation today to talk about what has changed and talking about important parts of our home today. So I'm joined by two experts, and we're going to welcome them here today. We have Alfred Jury from Euroline Windows, and he's been an entrepreneur for construction for decades and is a certified passive house consultant. Euroline is one of the first Canadian manufacturers to produce passive house certified windows and doors, and Alfred works closely with architects, builders, and designers to ensure that they can reach their energy efficient goals through windows. Thank you so much for joining us, Alfred. And we have Mark Rosen here today, Director of Building Science with Building Knowledge Canada, and he is an architect, a registered energy advisor, and a building science consultant. Twice recognized as Ontario's Energy Advisor of the Year, Mark is a leader in advancing building performance standards across the country. So together we'll talk about the windows, and we'll talk about mechanical systems as part of an integrated design process in a home. And we're talking about how these technologies will shape the future of housing. So thank you to both of you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. So just to give you a bit of background, so HAVAN just celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2024. So 50 years is a long time, and so much has changed from those early days in terms of house design and mechanical systems and windows to where we are today. So we wanted to kind of jump in to talk about how that technology has changed, how it affects your home as a homeowner, and whether it's new or if it's a retrofit. There's a lot of things to consider, and we want to kind of explore that and talk about a little bit more here today. So maybe one of the questions is, if we're talking about the change in technology, to both of you, what would you think is the single most important advancement that we've seen in mechanical systems and windows today?
Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, that's trying to nail it down to one thing is certainly a challenge. And if you could almost take it decade by decade and pick one per decade. Recently, I think the buzzword that is on the tips of most people's tongues is the advancement of heat pumps into this space. And I would put that forward as arguably one of the most significant advances because it represents a bigger leap in efficiency than most other incremental advances that we've seen over the years. It's sort of head and shoulders above the older systems that we're seeing it replace in retrofit scenarios. But it's by no means standing alone. As you said, there's so many things that have changed in this space. Window technology has advanced by leaps and bounds as well. And I think we're here today to talk about how they're all interconnected really at the hip as you consider their impact on home and comfort.
Yeah. How about you, Alfred? What do you think?
Well, when I first saw that question, I agree. It's hard to nail it down to one particular thing. I mean, we are always following the trends that we see in Europe as far as window technology. Think about, improved frame materials, using composite materials, things like that, better spacer bar around the edge of the glass. I think that it's all driven, though, by an increase in knowledge. I would say that that's the biggest change in all of our industries over especially the last decade, has been an increased knowledge of not only how your own system works, but how it integrates with other systems and then affects the whole building. So Europe is a leader because energy has always been expensive there. So that's why we buy products from Europe, like frame materials, for example. And they're very conscious of how those systems integrate into the rest of the building. So a thermal bridge-free frame system is probably the biggest change, and the consciousness of, things like condensation through the frame.
Yes.
I really like knowledge put forward as an answer to that as well. And I would suggest it's on both sides of the equation, not only from the builder and manufacturer's perspective, but the homeowner's perspective as well. And from that perspective, I would classify knowledge maybe in the expectations that homeowners have nowadays about the comfort that their homes are going to deliver. Yeah. If you think back 50 years, a home built in 1975 probably was making pretty minimal promises about how comfortable it was going to be.
I remember wearing a sweater at night because it was just a bit more draftier and a little bit cooler that, you were not turning up the heat. We're just putting on more layers.
And that was just understood to be the norm. That's just how it was, right? If your house was uncomfortable, you changed your clothing.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think the expectation is the house will deliver to the decimal places of degrees the comfort that people expect. And that puts a lot more pressure on builders and manufacturers to provide systems and solutions for that problem.
That's interesting, because you talked about, or both of you actually referred to the integration of the systems, and so maybe we just talk a little bit about the integrated design process. Now, Haven has a couple podcasts and videos on our website and YouTube channel that talk about what integrated design process is. So, but for those who are listening for the first time and don't really understand what that means, maybe we can talk a little bit about what is that and how is it different from previous processes or maybe more of a majority process that people or builders are using, and how does it include or benefit windows and mechanical systems.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want
I
to
can
take
take a
that
stab
one.
at that. Yeah,
Go
let me
first
give
and
it a try. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the integrated design process as a concept is really recognizing that waiting until very late on in the decision-making sequence to involve the parties that are contributing to the project's success sets up a project for additional cost and time delays and failures in areas that are very preventable, to put it very simply, if you bring everybody to the table very early on. And even individual trades and specialists who may not think they have anything to contribute at the design conversation stage are surprised often to find that, oh, we're talking about what type of mechanical system we're going to use. That affects duct sizing decisions, that affects drywall, that affects structure, that affects plumbing, it affects electricians, and suddenly they can say, hey, I think this would work better for my part of the job if we make a change now. The other thing that is important in an integrated design process is that it's not a linear process, it's a cyclical process. It revisits decisions that were made as new ones are made to see if they impact each other. And that's where windows and mechanical systems really become connected, because it's not always a linear process either. A builder designing a home for construction may have an idea of the performance that they're interested in achieving from their windows, but haven't yet picked a supplier. So they don't really know the window that they're getting yet. They might then make a decision about what mechanical system they're considering, and when they make a final decision on the windows, they have to revisit the sizing of that mechanical system to make sure that they're a fit. Or conversely, recognize that they could save money on their mechanical system if they make a better decision about their windows. And so rather than just saying, we've done that, let's set it aside and never go back again, the IDP process is really about revisiting all of your decisions as they affect each other so that you can evolve the project rather than simply stack the project from a series of decisions.
It seems interesting. That's a really great answer. I feel like it seems like it should be the way that you go into construction, but maybe people are not used to it. Is this kind of why maybe it's typically a linear process versus that integrated decision to do?
And since, I mean, budget is always top of mind. Everyone's first question is, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah, that's right.
And you cannot create an accurate budget if you plan as you go. So what Mark brought up, you choose your mechanical system, then you choose your windows much later in the process because you like the color they were, and he has to rejig what he's going to do. We're all familiar with the 6 or the 7 Ps. Perfect planning prevents poor performance. It also prevents poor budgets. So you can't budget accurately unless you do exactly what Mark was talking about. You look at your systems, you create an initial design, and then you maybe look at them again, or maybe a third time, and then you reconfigure some windows. You use, different glass coatings to better match the loads that are going to be required for the mechanical system that's designed. I think it's very important that you cannot plan as you go. The higher performing the building, especially, those previous designs are so crucial to remaining on budget.
Yeah, it's such a high performance project that why would you risk that having to make mistakes later in the project where it's costly and where it could have significant impact on the timeline of completion versus do it when it's on paper or on a computer screen so that you can make those changes much more easily, which makes sense.
Yeah,
that's why we call it measure twice, quite once, right?
Well, exactly, or mock up twice.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
recently completed a multifamily project in Hamilton with RDH Building Science, and the mechanical engineer, for example, did a mock up of the ductwork in his shop in a factory setting to prove that it was going to be airtight and it was going to function as it was supposed to. Those kinds of design process elements are so key. And then you will not have huge performance gaps either, right? You'll stay on budget and your building will perform as it's modeled.
And it's interesting to have the word budget come up in this context, because the resistance that we often face when we're trying to pitch this process to clients that haven't gone through it before is there's a perception that you're paying for a bunch of consulting up front that you could avoid.
Yeah.
You're spending early and when you'd rather save your money to put into the building. But after going through the process and really looking at it from 30,000 feet, most people recognize that the incremental spending at the beginning saved them from tremendously larger amounts of change orders or material changes later in the process when decisions affect your schedule, when they affect, your manufacturer's supply chain issues, all those sorts of things. So a little bit up front for much bigger payback. If it really goes to plan, it's almost invisible. You almost don't really see the savings that you achieved at the end because you simply avoided them entirely. And the other thing I really like that you said is, after you describe what the process is, a lot of people are sort of like, well, don't we do that? That seems like it makes a lot of sense that we should probably be doing that. And a lot of people I don't think recognize that it's really not something that they've invested in or understood completely, but it makes so much sense when you step back and look at it.
Yeah.
That moving forward after that makes
kind of from that 30,000 feet, like, just in terms of process and ease of knowing what's going forward with both eyes open kind of thing. That's really what the whole intention is behind that.
Yeah.
I just realized that maybe, for some of our listeners, we're talking right into like mechanical systems. And so maybe we'll just backtrack just a little bit just to talk about what is a mechanical system, what are mechanical systems in a home. Maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll throw out two new terms that would be useful for some listeners to understand. In a house, there's three technically. I'm going to get technical where I'm trying not to get technical. But a house is made up of elements that we refer to as passive elements. Those are the parts of the building that don't require an energy source, that don't move or burn or operate. That's your walls, your windows, your foundation, your roof, the parts of the building that are constructed and exist for the lifespan of the home and contribute to comfort and energy efficiency just by virtue of what they are, as opposed to what they actively do.
Makes sense.
So that would be a passive element. Conversely, active elements are the operating pieces of a home that control the indoor environment by means of burning energy to do so. So after you've done the passive part of the home, which we refer to as the building envelope, the active components of the home would be your furnace, your hot water heater, your air conditioner if you have one, maybe your heat recovery ventilator or your HRV. And all of these things use an energy source like electricity or natural gas to serve a purpose, to serve the space by heating or conditioning the air, dehumidifying it. And that together we would refer to as a mechanical system, that active component collection.
No, that's a great explanation about, especially about the passive and the active, because they are both, again, integrated into the overall comfort and design of the home. But maybe you just thought maybe it's a heat pump or something that I need to have control over, but it's not necessarily that we're talking about outside exterior first and then going inside. So thank you for that explanation. I think that helped a lot. So let's kind of shift our focus a little bit, talking about our like retrofits. So not everybody can build a new home and they're looking to improve their own space. So a lot of our members work in the renovation side of the business and help families retrofit older homes. So when you're looking about that question, like, do I upgrade my windows or mechanical systems? Like, what should they consider first when they're trying to make that decision on moving forward? What do they do?
I'll go first on this.
Please.
Windows first.
I think you would agree. I mean, there would be no point really in upgrading your mechanical system if your windows are going to leak all that energy out of your building.
Okay.
It is really a very effective way to improve your envelope without taking your envelope completely apart.
Okay.
But then again, there's no point in improving your windows vastly if you're making your windows perform better than your wall assembly. If your mechanical system is so undersized or poor performing that it's not doing its job either.
Yeah. In retrofits, A lot of times, there's a lot to consider in retrofits. A lot of times, retrofits are artificially influenced by available incentives.
Mm-hmm.
We recently saw the Greener Homes program really encourage homeowners across the country to do something to their homes. And overwhelmingly, the decision was made to retrofit heat pumps because it was aligned with the cost of the incentive that was available. From a purely building science point of view, we would typically suggest that the passive elements, the building envelope of the home, should be upgraded first because the active elements serve it, right? And once you've defined the amount of service needed, you can make a better decision on your mechanical systems when you get to that stage of the retrofit. The challenge is that retrofits are also often not done in one shot. They're often done in phases. Like
Especially due to cost and stuff,
what you
right?
can afford to do now
yeah.
and what you plan to do the next time you can afford to do something. And that does muddy the water a little bit because, to your example, if you have a mechanical system, let's say a furnace in an older home tends to be very oversized already. Oversized meaning that it provides way more heat than is needed to meet the demand that the home has.
Okay.
And if you put in really good windows, you're going to reduce that demand even farther, making that furnace even more oversized. And we can get into the technical details of why this is true later, but oversized furnaces deliver worse comfort, not better comfort. That's a misnomer that most people don't really appreciate, that actually having a furnace that is really overpowering the need for heat in a home means it's going to turn on and off very quickly rather than run very consistently and provide heat in like a longer duration to heat up the ductwork, to heat up the homes. You can sort of think of it as, if we flip the example, we go into cooling. If you were sitting sweltering in the heat and there was an oscillating fan and it only sort of just hit you once in a while and you're like, oh, that felt good, and then it goes away again.
That's right.
That's what an oversized mechanical system does. It's there for a split second and you're appreciating it, and then it goes away again because the thermostat's been satisfied.
Interesting.
And everything shuts off.
Okay.
And that underperforms from a comfort perspective. It burns out equipment more quickly. It has all sorts of other implications as to what it does. So that's a very long and roundabout way to say that it's not a universal truth that windows should come first or mechanicals should come first. It really does depend on the context of your retrofit project and which one is farther behind, and how can you make a decision that brings them closer to balance.
So I think that was well explained. I think that this comes back again to that improved knowledge. So you may see a rebate available to change your windows. Making one change may actually create a different problem for you. It could actually create bad problems in your house. You could create humidity problems or moisture problems, condensation problems. It's really important to not just jump on one thing and see it as your problem, but to consult. Like, call a mechanical engineer, call a couple of window people, get some good advice, and weigh that and see if you're speaking to people who seem like they know what they're talking about. Because somebody might give you the correct advice. The mechanical guy might say, yeah, in your house, you need to change your windows first. Vice versa. The window guy might say, you know what, these windows, unless you do this and this, it's not worth it right now, because you should change your mechanical system first. Spend your money correctly. Otherwise, you might harm your comfort, or you might be spending money that you're going to have to spend again. So often in the window retrofit business, we see people just basically getting newer, cleaner looking windows. And because of the way they were retrofitted into the building, they may actually be causing a problem around them because they're essentially just caulked into place. So you get nice, shiny, new white windows, but they work worse than your old wood windows that you had in there before. So that would be, the old adage, pay me now, pay me later. You don't want to spend money on something twice, especially.
No, that's good advice. Just kind of diving a little bit about windows and talking about, there's such a huge variety in houses. Windows. There's triple pane, double pane. There's coatings to keep the heat in, and keep the heat out, and different ways of systems to open and close, and really windows have become so quite technical, I think, as any other technology in a home. So, from your opinion, like, what do you think is the best approach for a homeowner thinking about selecting windows? Like what is like kind of a good pathway for them to know if it's the right thing to do first, or if it is, like, how do they go about that process? It can be quite daunting, I think, just thinking, oh, I have to replace my windows. What do I do first?
Yes, well, there would be two different conversations, whether it's a new build or a retrofit. In new construction, we have the step code here in BC, so we're going to get some direction on energy efficiency goals with your window systems. For example, if you're going for high performance, triple glazing is going to be the go-to. I mean, there's a conversation about the carbon, the embodied carbon of triple glazing versus double glazing. But in the long term, those are outweighed by, the usage of electricity, the usage of energy in that building. So, and the longevity of the systems. In a retrofit, double glazing might still be a good option, depending on the age of the building. If you're not going to go all in with a refit of the wall assembly, then a double glazed window with the correct low-E coatings are going to be the right way to go. A big thing to keep in mind in either of those cases is solar heat gain. Well, solar heat gain has been used as a way basically to cheat the balance sheet.
Okay.
A lot. And it can be, a lot of people are posting about this that are knowledgeable about building science, that, it's your ally, and it is your ally. It's used in passive house design all the time. It's your ally until it becomes your enemy. When it's your enemy, it's your worst enemy, because I think Mark would agree, it's harder to cool a building back down than it is to warm one up.
100%.
So if you have just a really high solar heat gain because it balances out the really poor U values of your windows or the insulation values of your windows, that's a really bad way to do the math, and it will come back to bite you.
And I certainly sympathize with homeowners that are faced with these decisions, because you can see how quickly they become technical, to your point.
That's right.
Windows have more like embedded technology available and optional technology than a homeowner can possibly ever comprehend in a sales pitch in a showroom. And to your point about windows that just kind of look and feel new, that's sort of the language that we hear in the realty market, right? You buying a new or an older home and it says new windows 2 years ago, but nothing about what windows those are. And there might not even be a collective understanding in the home buyer market, a segment of the market, that there are options beyond maybe how many panes of glass you get. And the nuance of that doesn't necessarily need to be understood by every individual homeowner, but it's worth knowing that there are experts that can look at this with you and help you make a good decision. That's your energy advisors and your window manufacturers and your HVAC contractors speaking to each other before any one of them sells you on a direction that you're planning to go.
No, that's a good point.
And that is a good indicator if you're in a showroom, and the person that's advising you or consulting with you is consulting. They're asking you, who are you working with? What kind of, how is this building being heated? How is it being cooled? Other things that don't come into play, without getting too technical, but your windows have stickers on them from the NFRC that shows their performance data. But that's based on a model size, a very small window. So when you're looking at the whole building and you may have, it might be in West Vancouver with a lot of south-facing glass, that needs to be looked at very carefully by your window consultant. The other thing that the NFRC doesn't take into consideration a lot is the airtightness. So does this window have multi-point locking hardware with compression gaskets? Is it going to be very airtight? All of that drafty feeling you feel beside a window might not either actually be draftiness either. It might be a very conductive frame system. So you have a beautiful looking window system, but it's got a very conductive frame, and you feel that Coanda effect. You feel the thermodynamics in the building, the air moving in front of that system because it's so cold. And it's not a true draft. It's not wind coming from the outside of the building. It's movement of air from the cold surfaces versus the warm surfaces.
The one thing I like to emphasize to homeowners that feel overwhelmed by all of this technical information when it comes to windows in particular is to say to them, don't worry, we'll help figure this out. But keep in mind, especially if you have any sort of more modern home that has larger areas of glass, that your windows are very likely to be the element in your home that most contributes to your perception of comfort. They have an outsized impact on our perception of comfort than arguably any other small thing, especially walls. It's actually very interesting to me in the new housing side of things. We talk about walls a lot. How much insulation are you going to put in your walls? exterior insulation, all these technical details. And we don't spend as much time talking about windows because they seem like they're a supplied component that you just plug in. But we're sitting in a room right now, for those listeners that aren't seeing the cameras here, we have, solid walls on 3 sides and one wall that's almost entirely glass. And if it was cold outside, that's the wall we'd be worried about.
Yeah.
That's the wall that just sitting here with the sun not shining would be drawing heat off of our body through radiant heat loss, and most contributing to our feeling of either comfort or discomfort. That's a roundabout way of saying, don't discard the window decision lightly.
Yeah.
It sometimes becomes the victim of budgetary consideration. When you're in a retrofit, you're working on a fixed budget, and you see windows as one line item, usually with a pretty big number beside it. And then you see 30 or 40 other things that all look small in comparison. But don't target it. My recommendation, personal recommendation to pump up your tires a little bit, is don't discount that importance there. That line item might be the best money you spend in your retrofit because of that value as a homeowner that you will feel if you get the best windows that you can afford to put into your home. Other systems can respond to that. And so even beyond that discussion about balance, about which one do you do first and which one serves which, I've never had somebody regret the decision to put in very good windows. Even if that sort of means their furnace is oversized, their home is going to be more comfortable to begin with. The oversized furnace won't hurt them as much.
Yeah.
So it is, maybe we're arguing ourselves into a position where we do strongly say, start with your windows if you can at all afford to do so.
Yeah.
I think an important point, like a good analogy here, like windows are often referred to as the weakest link in the chain of a building envelope. And I do a presentation that shows, the diminishing returns of just keeping on adding insulation versus adding a much higher performing window. So if your window to wall ratio on average is in a home, in a bedroom, would be like, say, 30% window, 70% wall. If the window is twice as good, it more than triples the overall effective value of that wall. But if you triple the insulation, it stays in the same spot because that window. So to go even further than the weakest link, imagine it's not there at all. So imagine you walked up to an alpine hut in the Coast Mountains here, and it had 2-foot thick walls, airtight assembly, beautiful steel roof, everything, and it had one opening, but there was nothing in it at all. You would still be as cold as you were outside. So if you just managed to put an airtight layer over that, you would be warmer.
Yeah.
So the windows played that key of a role. So if he had a really good mechanical system in that hut, it would just be pouring air out that opening. So that's the best analogy for windows and why they are so important. And like Mark said, there's this, that big sticker price that you see. But sometimes you have to spend the money on the boring things to have a comfortable home.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, in our earlier discussion, we were talking about society as well has a big influence on where you spend your money, right? So it makes sense to do your windows and buying the best you can, but sometimes or a mechanical system. But I think windows you can see and you can appreciate kind of aesthetically, but maybe mechanical system not so much. They're usually behind the wall in the closet where you can't see it. So how do we shift that thought on where you put your money? I know we did talk about your comfort, like your everyday comfort, going by the windows, or you're going by your system. Like, are you feeling hot? Are you feeling cold in different hot spots or cold spots in your house? So how do we start encouraging or helping homeowners, or especially people listening today, on why you should consider that versus maybe the $20,000 counter space or whatever? I know, because I think of anybody who's looking to retrofit, who's looking to buy new, that has a lot of appeal, right? It has that physical, tangible piece that it does mean a lot to them, especially if they're venturing and spending money. So how do we kind of shift that conversation a little bit so that we think, really you should look at doing these important fundamentals first before we go into the high ticket visual pieces in your home?
We do a lot of presenting to large rooms at Building Knowledge, and there's a bit of a social experiment we often do in the room. We start by asking the question, how many of you here live in an uncomfortable home? And we don't get a lot of hands. Most people actually don't think of their homes as an uncomfortable place to be. But then we ask a more nuanced question. How many of you have a a basement that's a few degrees colder than the main floor of your house? Or how many of you have trouble keeping the same temperature in all of the bedrooms in your homes? And all of a sudden, we get a lot of hands. And we point out that that's a comfort issue that you've just acknowledged in your home. How do you ascribe some value to that? Until you value solving for that issue that you've now just acknowledged you have, it's hard to tell you that replacing your furnace with a new air source heat pump and better furnace is going to make you healthier and happier and more comfortable in your own home. You have to help them see the whole picture, I think, because you're right. You don't typically have dinner guests over after your renovation and say, let's go look at the furnace and see how cool this new furnace is. It's great. I mean, I do that. I love going to visit people's mechanical rooms when they go over to their
Probably one of the few.
But I'm an exception to the rule, I think. So you do have to sort of help people see that, because it's very difficult to fight against the shiny new. That comes with a kitchen, that comes with a bathroom, that comes with a floor. It's not to say that they're not also valid desires and things that people strive for in a home, because they matter as well. It's just trying to help people understand the larger picture. You know, if you spend a whole bunch of money on a renovated kitchen that you're still uncomfortable in, it's a little bit disappointing at best, you know, that you can't be warmer in that kitchen than you used to be.
That's a good insight.
I think that, along the same lines, it's about what are your long-term goals for this build, and is comfort one of them? Is a healthy environment one of them? Is, mechanical systems with filtered air, like if you're talking passive house, where you have the ultimate in comfort and the ultimate in a healthy environment, where quiet is also a factor. I have a bit of an advantage in what I do, because what I sell is actually beautiful. It's something you see every day. I can give you a big, huge, 20-foot wide sliding panel door that looks gorgeous, but is also high performing. But the conversation between how much does this cost and how well it performs is kind of sometimes lost. It's what does it look like and how much does it cost? But fortunately, I think a lot of people, especially here on the West Coast, especially, I would say, are very conscious of their environmental impact of their build. So they are asking the right kinds of questions, like, what is this made out of? Is it recyclable? What's the carbon footprint of triple glazing versus double glazing? Which is great to hear. And they are concerned about how much energy they're going to consume and how comfortable their building is going to be, not just about the cost, but about the quality of what they're building. Because of the cost of building, lots of people are also thinking about making their home multi-generational.
That's true, yeah.
So they're thinking about their children. If they have a couple of kids, are they building a duplex that their children can inherit and share? And they want to just build a building that's going to last them for 50 years. I spoke to a builder I worked with. I asked him for a testimonial before the Passive House Canada conference, because he just built a passive house for himself and his family. His parents live in the suite. I'll make this quick. And his comment was that, I don't want to pass on to my children a building like I grew up in. That was, my parents were struggling to keep it warm. Our bedrooms were cold because they had to turn the heat down. So he wanted to give them a good quality building to inherit, which is a great mindset that I think is changing. So I think the mindset change is really a key part of this conversation we're having today.
And you've touched on something that is fascinating in my mind about the way that we make decisions as humans. And to dive on the psychological side for a second, at the end of all of this discussion, a home buyer or a homeowner looking to renovate is driven by emotional decision-making first. There's a reason you're considering this. Maybe it's because you're trying to house your aging parents or your future kids. Maybe it's because you have a family with health issues related to poor air quality. Maybe you need more space because you have a growing family. There is typically and most often an emotional driver first. Why are we even considering this? And then all of the considerations about energy efficiency, the technical requirements of this, doing the right thing, spending money where you can, become justifications that allow you to make the emotional decision. Our brains love to have this right-left discussion with each other where I make an emotional decision and then I justify it by saying, well, this is why it's okay that I did that. I'm going to save the planet. I'm going to save some money. I'm going to do all of these things. They're not the things we find, with some exceptions, that start the conversation, that drive the initial exploration to move. Nobody makes a decision to buy a new home because they want to save $17 a year on their electricity bill. But it might be a reason to allow yourself to move. If you can find, okay, the new house that I'm buying is more energy efficient, that helps me justify a little bit more money and to accept that this emotional decision is founded in some truth that I can get behind.
Until we follow Europe's example and we put energy consumption on real estate documents. So in Europe, even if you're buying a tiny 500 square foot condo, it tells you how much energy the place consumes and what the greenhouse gas emissions are.
Oh, really? Is this a requirement?
It's a requirement. It's on, those little pamphlets that we see here, the little one pager real estate explanation. It shows how many kilowatts per hour per meter squared and what the greenhouse gas emissions are. And you can look at two places that are side by side, and this one is using half as much power as the one beside it because they did a proper refit or it's a newer building. It's a great concept. I think that's the next thing after the step code.
Okay, interesting. Just talking about a little bit about Passive House, because I know that's a certification program, and maybe it's like the Cadillac of the world. Maybe it's the Tesla. I'm not sure. Whatever you wanted to make that comparison to, but like a lot of people maybe can't afford that standard, as we talked about a little bit. But what can they pull from that standard that they can pull into their own house? So that, like, I can't afford that level, but I would love to consider those things. So what are your thoughts on some of those key points in a Passive House standard that you could pull in that relates to maybe mechanical and windows? I'm
happy that this question is being raised because that goes back to the integrated design process. So looking at your whole building very early. So if you're going to build a passive house, a truly passive house, you really do have to start before with the technical stuff, before you even start drawing the building with the architect. But if you've got a building and you want to use some of the key elements of passive house, that's a great idea. So the key elements being airtightness, HRV, so you've got fresh air ventilation, and super well insulated walls and no thermal bridges. Those are things that you can put into your building without going all the way to a certified passive house, and you can decide which elements are most important. All of those things are going to make a better building.
Yeah.
But to get to that super, super low energy consumption number that you need to hit for passive house, you could stray from that a little bit. And some of those things like airtightness are not really expensive ways to achieve a really much better building. So obviously really high performing windows would be something that would be worthwhile spending on any building you want to consume low energy. And then the airtightness, I would say, would be a second one. So you can accomplish airtightness with, simple things like taping your foundation to the exterior sheathing and then taping all of your exterior sheathings to create an airtight envelope. Right away, I mean, as this building science develops, we're seeing that airtightness really is more key than insulation. A lot of insulation with poor airtightness will not perform as well as a lot of airtightness with less insulation.
Well, even to go even farther, it's not even that it won't perform as well. It may actually be compromised. Very poor attention to airtightness introduces more water into our walls than anything else, and can actually be a source of rot and failure if you're not taking care of that. But you're right. I like the question because I think that has been the unfortunate dual reputation of passive house, that it is very high performing and there's a lot to love about it, but that it's also very high cost. And then it gets set aside immediately in a lot of conversations. But the fundamental tenets of passive house about super insulation, extreme air tightness, very good quality windows, and ventilation for the health of the occupants speaks to the real motivators of that program. On the efficiency side, it targets a certain energy threshold because it recognizes the climate emergency that it's trying to serve. But the promise to the occupant is comfort. The takeaway from the people that live in these homes, and I built and lived in one in Ottawa for 5 years, is that it's the most comfortable house you will ever live in. It's hard to describe that because we use such relative terms when we talk about comfort. Ask somebody how comfortable their home is, and they say, it's more comfortable than yours, or it's more comfortable than his. But what does that really mean?
Yeah, that's right.
But it means things like bed sheets aren't as cold when you get into them in the winter. It means when you lean back against the edge of the bathtub, it's not as cold and you don't have to get that shock that you get. There are these little intangible moments in time, but if you don't connect those for the home buyer, home renovator, it's hard to understand that. But you can strive towards that all the time, right? And if you don't go,
you just assume that's just part of living in your home, right? And so actually that can be preventable, which is interesting. I'm going to jump to another question, but before we do that, just from a homeowner perspective, we're talking about replacement of windows, and can you, for budget reasons, you want to go for the best windows you can purchase, but sometimes there's too many windows in the home and maybe that cost is quite expensive. Is it, I don't know if it's advisable, but could you do it in a stage process? Like if you do like maybe one floor of windows first and stuff. I think the ultimate goal is to do that replacement, and it may have the in-between effect where it's being better upstairs because it's more thermally protected versus you go downstairs where it's still a bit drafty. Do you think that's still a good way? Because I think some people think I have to do it all or none. But can you do it a bit of a stage approach for costing and for just for that
Oh,
longevity?
absolutely. I mean, it would be more the inconvenience factor than anything, I
Yeah.
think, for the homeowner. So windows can be done one at a time.
Mm.
But if you planned well and you were going to say go after either one level of the home or one facade of the home at a time, labor is going to be more expensive if crews are coming back and forth a bunch of times, if you have them all on site at once. But absolutely, renovations are done in 3 or 4 stages all the time. So you might want to do a new, like there's an addition on the back of the kitchen, so there's 3 or 4 new units there, and then you do the bedrooms adjacent right away,
Yeah.
and you improve that part of the house. That's absolutely true. And again, it's about getting good advice from the person who's helping you
Yeah, that's right.
to say, yes, you know what, I would go one more window on this phase.
Yeah.
We don't have to do all of it at once, because sometimes when the budgets get daunting, things don't get done at all.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't want to be all or nothing, right? Because is there a way to do it?
Exactly. Yeah, we would say to people all the time, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's worth going as far as you think you can get. And even if that means decisions like some of the windows with the best windows I can get, or all of the windows with an almost as good window that's still striving for high performance, you can balance that decision as you go there. But yeah, I really like that you raised it. It's not all or nothing. You can land in the middle, and that we should be congratulating people that are even taking that step.
Interesting. I'll be talking to you guys when I have to replace my windows. So there you go. I think too, just, I know there's we want to talk about some checklists and stuff just before we go. But one more thing about, just quickly talk about maintenance. I think we talk about putting the new stuff in and then you kind of leave it and forget about it. But I think maintenance is such an important piece to mechanical systems, especially, but also your windows, to ensure that they perform as they're intended, that they meet the warranty requirements of your home or for that particular product. So can we just talk about a couple of things that that can help homeowners understand like what's required, when it's required, or where they can source that information?
Should we start with mechanical systems?
Yeah, let's start there.
So with mechanical systems, the low-hanging fruit for homeowners is filters. If you have a furnace filter or a filter in your ventilator, they need to be changed. They need to be changed annually at a minimum, ideally every 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
And it can be as simple as a visual check. Turn off the furnace, pull out the filter and have a look at it. Does it look filthy? Get a new one. Does it look reasonable? Let it go for another 3 months. Filters serve all kinds of important purposes for us in keeping the interior air quality what it should be and protecting the equipment from burnout. The dirtier the filter is for the longer period of time, the harder the motors have to work to overcome that resistance, and the worse that is for the life of your equipment. When it comes to things like air conditioners and heat pumps, they also have what's called a line set, which is you often see it as a copper tube next to an insulated tube going from the outside unit through the wall of your house into the ductwork somewhere. That's charged with a refrigerant. I mean, it's full of a pressurized substance that is important in moving the heat in and out of the building. And that can lose pressure over time or fall and should be checked by a qualified technician.
Okay.
So it's worth sort of establishing and formulating a relationship with your HVAC contractor for a maintenance schedule. Have them come out once a year and just check the operation of the system. And they can also at that time check on the controls, because heat pumps are perhaps the most sensitive equipment from the point of view of having proper control setups. Controls meaning how the thermostat speaks to it, what it's asking it to do and when. To ensure that it's meeting its highest and best efficiencies. And that is the purview of professionals and not of homeowners per se.
Okay.
So you do want to have a bit of a relationship with a trusted contractor to come and look at that from time to time.
Okay, so not just a DIY and
Not all just
YouTube.
DIY.
It's the
Yeah.
best to speak to
Yeah.
people who know
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
best. So how about windows? Like how do you best maintain the life of a window?
Well, a window is a more of the passive part of the building.
Yeah.
So it's more about cleanliness.
Mhm.
You know, so the maintenance on a window will be pretty obvious. So if you have, say, a sliding door system, for example, you want to keep the track clean. If you're mowing your lawn and you're hitting the window with a bunch of grass and you just let it there and bake onto the window frame, it'll come off, but it'll be harder to come off. But cleanliness, our windows, for example, have an integrated rain screen system with drainage out the front of the frames. So you're going to want to make sure that that's not all gummed up, which typically it wouldn't be. I mean, it's Windows is pretty basic maintenance, and just be careful around your glass. Like sometimes we'll see on a job site and like right in new construction, for example, where somebody uses a grinder next to glass, and it doesn't seem like it's doing anything, but those little flicks of metal are pitting the glass, and it's permanent damage.
I'm laughing because I did that in my passive house in Ottawa, and I had those little pits, and it frustrated the heck out of me. I didn't realize I'd done it at the time.
Oh no.
And you call the window guy, and you're like, "Oh, my glass has a defect," and it's like, "No, you've got little pieces of glass stuck into it. It burns it right in there." Nice.
We all make
lesson you
mistakes.
learn
We all
once, yeah.
learn from that. Yeah, that's why you
Yeah, but
learn.
yeah, it's much less complicated than a mechanical system, but it does take, like anything on a house, it takes, you pay attention to it. It's like you need a little bit of paint on your trim once in a while.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think it's just getting into the habit, maybe, right? It's just like once a year, maybe you do a little window check, and then maybe every someone's birthday, because that's that time of year that you go and check, or something like the new year or something. So,
I'll add one more thing to the list for the mechanical systems if I can.
of course.
And that's understand what mechanical system you have.
Yes.
The reason I say that, but we were talking before we started about, sometimes you see that box outside of your house.
Yes.
You don't know if it's an air conditioner or a heat pump.
Yes, that's me.
And it's important to know because in some places, people are in the habit of covering their air conditioners for the winter. They'll tarp them off or they'll install a cover to protect it over the winter.
Okay.
If you do that to a heat pump, which is trying to provide heat to your home during the winter, you have blocked its ability to function entirely. You've basically, cut off your home's heating system at the knees and hoping that it keeps up. So you need to know, do you have a heat pump or do you have an air conditioner? And it's not always obvious to the naked eye. I can't even really offer without visuals a sense of what you can look for, but ask. Most people who have been in their homes for a while will understand that heat pumps are fairly new. It's not likely that you've got one if you've been in your home for 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
If you've been in your home for less than 5, there is a chance, especially in an environment like we have here in Vancouver, where it's a very compatible system with the climate. It works everywhere in Canada, but especially here, it works very well.
A little more mild weather, right? So excellent. So maybe before we end up today, and we had a great conversation so far. I know we could spend days on this conversation. So for the homeowner, like, do you you often get common questions, and I'm sure a lot of it we covered today. But what are do you have like a checklist or a couple of things that would relate to whether it's the mechanical systems or the windows on you're looking to do it? What are some top 10 tips you have to a homeowner who's looking to look into mechanical systems or to windows? Just kind of a little bit of a summary.
Well, what's an interesting part and a fun part of what I do on the day-to-day working with a family building a new custom home, for example, is we get to play with their plans. We look at the elevations for them, and we may change configurations to come up with the most cost-effective way to get what they want. So they want a really nice looking, high-performing window, but they've got a bunch of big operable doors, which is basically the most expensive way to do big glass.
Okay.
But the most efficient frame to glass ratio is big glass, less frame, and less operability. So you could accomplish, for example, the same views west south facing with big picture windows and then a smaller sliding door element. And it all still looks the same, and it you're never going to open up all of those doors anyways. So your budget suddenly is dropped it's dropped a lot from what was drawn, and you still are getting what you want. Because really the first question is always, how much is it going to cost?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's about finding a way to get what you want, how you want to look, and how you want to last, and still fitting your budget without making a compromise and going to something that looks nice and it's much cheaper, but it performs terribly.
Because you end up changing that out anyways in a few years because it's not what you want it to be or expected.
Exactly. Like it would be a shame to design a beautiful looking window system and move into the house and find out that you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like it was stickered to barely meet the minimum that you need to do to hit the step code or the basic building code. But all of a sudden it's like, wow, this system is very cold, or it's very, very hot in the summer. And I'm stuck with it now because it's part of my envelope. It's not like changing your fridge.
No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So
impact.
it is an integrated system and it does not change. So you are stuck with it for the long term, and you may regret that, it might have been a fairly big amount of money that you saved even, but it's going to affect your comfort right out of the gate.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think from a top 10 checklist kind of an idea, my first advice would be don't have a separate checklist for your windows and mechanicals. Have one checklist that has both on it. And then, this might be a little bit self-serving, and I should declare that I am an energy advisor before I say this, but an energy advisor is a professional that a lot of people don't think of to work with as they're considering these changes. But if you can find an energy advisor that knows their stuff, that is more than just somebody who's coming to do a blower door test, but actually understands building science, they can help you navigate that trade-off, keeping in mind that the North Star here for homeowners at the end of the day will be comfort. How can we balance the decisions you're considering mechanically and with windows to make sure that we're going for comfort at the end of that? And how do we balance those things or help phase them, support that with data from an energy model, et cetera? More and more people are becoming familiar with engaging an energy advisor for rating their homes for incentive programs, maybe one day for sale or for code, who knows? But even voluntarily, I think they bring a lot of value to a service like a retrofit. And like you said, pay a little bit now instead of a lot later might put you in a much better final place to get that little bit of help along the way as you make those decisions.
Kind of centralizes your decision making, right? Versus going through everybody and just kind of centralize one. And here's what they've told me. What do you think is best?
That's what we're finding. We're really finding that energy advisors more and more are the center of the wheel. And in the way that architects are in the commercial space, architects have to know enough about everything to speak to everybody. And energy advisors are starting to fill that role in residential construction where there's not always an architect involved because of their professional. They have professional fees that are a little bit different. But energy advisors are more and more becoming conversant in the language of HVAC contractors, window suppliers, insulation installers, framers, weather barriers, flashing window openings properly. All of the things that are touched by building science and energy efficiency are becoming within scope for energy advisors. And that makes them a good sounding board for these ideas when you're considering a big decision in one area. What else is this going to affect? What else do I need to think about before I make that decision?
And when you're consulting with a window supplier, that person should be very cognizant of that. They are not an energy advisor, but they should be very aware that the energy advisor requirement is not just a number on a piece of paper that they have to match their sticker to.
Yes.
They need to understand, and you should get that sense when you're having a conversation with your consultant about windows, that they understand how the windows are going to affect your day-to-day in that building. So I'm a passive house consultant, so that's always back of mind for me. And I'm looking at something that's much lower performing than passive house, but I'm still understanding that we don't want to make, like we were mentioning before, solar heat gain mistakes. Because, we can use a different solar heat gain on a different side of the house and really make these windows work for you. Those are your passive gains. So that knowledge, you should really be getting a sense of that for the person you're talking to about windows. If you are buying a vehicle, for example, in a car dealership, and the guy said, well, this is the least expensive, least safe vehicle that I can let you leave with here today, but hey, it'll get you from point A to point B. That's not what you
person.
Well, that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear that it's going to keep your family safe and comfortable and you're going to be able to use it for years. It's not just the cheapest option.
No, that's a good analogy. I think a lot of people, because a house is so complex, that having that analogy with vehicles, because it seems to be something you buy more regularly, and it's just easier to use those analogies. So I appreciate that. I think that helps kind of create that understanding of what that means and what kind of questions and expertise you need. So, so we had a great conversation today. I know we could talk about this forever, but we're going to wrap up today. Alfred, Mark, thank you so much for joining me today on this conversation. We could talk about this forever. Some great information, and thank you so much. And we want to make sure that everybody has a safe, comfortable, and great space. And those mechanical systems and windows are such an important part of it. So thank you for sharing extra expertise today. So we are going to say thank you very much, and to a big acknowledgement to our sponsors of today's podcast. We have BC Housing, BC Hydro, FortisBC, Trail Appliances, and Rami Film. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.